Leading in Ministry is a video podcast designed to share anecdotal information that helps equip leaders in practical ways. Personal stories help drive the points home while making it both entertaining and informative.
I am so excited for this very first video podcast that we're doing. And tonight I have a special guest for our first one. We're going to have a lot of special guests, but I'm really excited because for me, it's has special meaning. Tonight I have Dave Thornhill with us. Dave Thornhill pastors Westside Church of the Nazarene right here in Indianapolis. But more importantly, he is my pastor. And so I've got to experience what leadership looks like firsthand. I have a first row kind of seat, and it's been an exciting journey for Cheryl and I during this time. And so, Pastor, I'm so glad to see you tonight. And I know that you have a lot of good stuff that you're going to share. The title for what I've asked you to share is Leading During a Crisis. But before we get to that, would you take just a moment? Because I think one of the key things about any leader is how well does he lead in his family? And I've gotten to see that up close, and I've just enjoyed getting to observe how you lead with your family. And tell me a little bit about you and your family, would you?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. It's an honor to be your first podcast guest. So I'm pretty honored by that. So that's pretty cool. Thanks for having me on. Again, my name's Dave Thornhill. My wife is Erica. We do have 3 kids: Jackson, who just graduated from Olivet, Carter, who will be a sophomore at Olivet this fall, and Reagan, who will be a freshman at Olivet this fall. And we have 3 great kids who love Jesus. And you're seeing us now kind of, Don, toward the end of raising our kids' lives. You know, at the beginning of our parenting career, there was a lot of bumps and bruises for sure. But part of where we are today with just 3 faithful kids has been going through some of those bumps and bruises and learning from other people, and repenting of our mistakes and trying to get better along the way. And God has blessed us for sure with 3 kids who love Jesus and a wonderful family. Thanks for asking.
Well, that made me think about this, though. I may not have gotten to see it while your kids were small, but I'm getting to see it when you're about to enter a new crisis, and that's doing life without any kids at home. So yeah. Maybe I'll have you back after you experience that, and you can give us an update and tell us a little bit more information.
There'll be a lot of crying.
That aspect.
There's gonna be a lot of crying when that happens. We're gonna miss them for sure.
No.
It's coming.
My word. Yeah. Well, Pastor. So I already mentioned that the theme tonight is leading in a crisis. And so I wanted you to take a little bit of time because I think it's an absolutely critical thing to know how to do that because we're going to face crisis during our lifetime. And you've pastored for how long now?
Since 1993, so 27 years.
Oh my, that's a lot of years.
Yeah, so, I don't know how that happened. Yeah.
So tell me, in those 27, 28 years, what are a couple of things that jump into your mind as far as some crisis that you had to handle?
Yeah, you're hitting. So there's 5 things I want to share tonight. And that's the first thing, and you're hitting right on it, that leaders will face a crisis. You'll face a lot of crises, and some of them are small, right? Some of them are big, and I faced some small crises. Like in Kansas, we started a church plant, and we faced all the crises that a church plant faces. Like I remember one Sunday morning, the drummer not showing up, which was like a music crisis, of course, right? Trying to figure out how to have music without a drummer. Early on, really early on, the first 6 months or so in, there was a week we couldn't make payrolls. We had to figure that out. So we faced some of those. In 2008, that's when the housing crisis hit. That was big.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
I remember when 9/11 hit. That was a national crisis that we had. Gulf War, there were some big ones. So leaders will have crisis no matter if you're a coach of a baseball team, and your starting pitcher broke his arm, or if you're president of the United States and there's a pandemic, you will face crisis. I faced many. I faced two today. You weren't even in the office to catch these. So
Oh no.
no big deal. But they just keep coming. Crises come for leaders for sure. And I've seen a lot of them. I can tell you even more stories if you want. Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, yeah, you have several points I'm sure that you would like to share tonight. Why don't you begin that with us tonight?
Yeah, well, that was my first one. Let me dive into that. So leaders will face a crisis. As we know, we are not immune to it. As a matter of fact, one of the ways you can tell the difference between a leader or just a hired hand is a leader runs towards the crisis. A hired hand runs away from the crisis. Jesus talks about that, like the sheep know his voice. The shepherd is going into the pen or going chasing the wolf, and the hired hands are running away. But leaders will face a crisis. You will face small crisis. You will face big crisis. You will face crises that affect your community. A couple of years ago, one of the high schools in town had a big sexting scandal, with phones.
Yeah.
100 and some kids that were, they got in trouble, and so there was that in the community. Sometimes you'll face little ones within a staff or with a board member. So leaders will face crisis. It's not a matter of if, it's when. And really in tune to it, there's going to be a lot of them, even daily little things that come along the way. And leaders, they don't want crisis. They don't want problems. But leaders are designed to look for them and embrace them. And really, that's when leaders get to be their sweet spot, is understanding when a crisis comes. Leaders, there's a natural something in you that's drawn to fixing that problem. So if anybody's ever wondering out there, if they're wondering, am I a leader? Do I have leadership potential? One of the ways to gauge that is when crisis comes your way, do you find yourself running towards it, trying to fix it, even imperfectly, or running away from it? And there's a indicator in you, because leaders will face crisis. That's for sure. That first point is crisis will come. And this year we faced a whole bunch of them. And Corona has been a crisis in itself that has bred a lot of other small crises for everybody, right? So crisis comes, and that's my point number one, is that they come, right?
Yeah, and I really love that thought, that when that crisis comes, a true leader is going to run toward it. He's not running away from it.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
not because they have all the answers, but it's just that's the way God's wired them and challenged them, and they're going for it.
It's almost instinct that they're going to go right for it and try to solve the issue.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, continue with your thought.
So with that, knowing that crisis will come your way, leaders, you must be ready. If you wait to be ready for a crisis, like until it hits, you won't be. It will blow you over. And I've learned that the hard way sometimes. We all have. So I've not done this perfectly, but like the Boy Scouts say, what do they? How do they do it? Be prepared.
Yeah.
Be the same way. So for me, it was about 10 years ago. I think I finally learned this lesson. That I learned that in ministry, especially, and this is probably true for any leader. A lot of days were pretty mundane. They weren't big Easter Sundays, and they weren't big crises. A lot of days were simply mundane. I don't mean that negatively, just
Sure.
right? And I learned that if I take advantage of those routine days in learning and growing and stretching myself, that when the big days come or the valleys hit, when those times comes, I'm ready for it. Because make no mistake, when a crisis hits, people that you lead they need you to lead, and they expect you to lead. And you better be ready for it in lots of ways. Like you and I just dealt with one of our vendors who was in a little bit of a crisis on their own. And the crisis he put himself in was that he didn't have enough cash on hand to manage this crisis. He wasn't ready for it, and he needed us as as a client to kind of work with him on an issue, which we did, of course. But it's little things like that, having cash on hand to deal with issues, some practical things aside, inside, having policies and procedures in place, having systems, in place. But most importantly, I think it's for a leader, you got to get your mind and heart ready. So for leaders, you should be There's two things. My friend Scott Lingo always says this. There's two things that change the person. It's the books you read or podcasts you're listening to and the people you talk with. And so in the mundane routineness of life, we should be doing as much as we can to learn from people and books. I listen to books online through Audible a lot and podcasts constantly, that I find that it took me a few years to get to that point. But when I got to that point and started learning as much as I could, that when crisis came, I wasn't full of knowledge. I was more full of wisdom and how to act. Because when crisis hits, and it does hit, whether small or whether drummer doesn't show up or Corona hits the country, your people need you to lead, and leaders got to know what to do. Sometimes it's okay for a leader to say, I don't know, but you can't say that all the time. If a leader constantly saying, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do, nobody's following you. A leader has to have some answers. You don't have to have everything perfectly, but you have to have some answers. And so knowing that crisis is going to come, you've got to be ready for that. You've got to be ready in your heart and your mind.
Yeah. So you said how important reading was for you. What? Give me a book that has really had a profound impact on you that you've read perhaps recently.
Yeah, there's lots of them. Recently, two of my favorites. One I'm reading right now. It's called The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. And it's a business book, but it's on how to lead, not just for a small goal, but a grand purpose, and how people want to follow the grand purpose. That's really inspirational. And a couple months ago, I did Patrick Lencioni's book, or about 3 weeks ago, I guess, The Motive. And it talks about, for understand why do they lead? What really is your motive behind leadership? And so those are two. There's my all-time favorite. I haven't looked at it in several years. It's called Orbiting the Giant Hairball. I forget the author's name, Gordon MacDonald, maybe. He was an artist for Hallmark. And he talks about being involved in an organization that has a lot of red tape, but how to orbit that thing and still be creative within the red tape. So super creative book. So those are a couple that come to mind just off the top of my head.
Oh, wow. Great stuff. I want you to keep sharing some of these points. I'm enjoying getting a little peek inside of how you think when it comes to leading. So keep sharing some things.
Yeah. My third point here is, when a crisis comes, you cannot lead out of fear at all. You cannot lead out of fear. You have to lead out of faith. When you become a leader, leadership is taking on responsibility, and it's denying yourself certain rights. That book, The Motive by Francis Lencioni, he talks about how one of the motives for people is to be leaders is because they want the rewards. That's a bad idea. But the right motive is responsibilities. And so it's our responsibility to lead people. And one of the rights that we lose, and leaders lose several rights to do it right, leaders lose the right to be fearful. People don't follow people who are fearful. You lose that right. It's not I even tell people, like I've told you and our staff, leaders, you lose the right to be sick on Sunday, Yeah. Minus something weird, but like if I get a sniffles on Sunday, I'm still going, right?
Yeah.
But in the grand scheme, you lose the right to be fearful. Now, here's a couple things happen when we are fearful. That's bad. And I'll put this in church words, but it fits for everybody. You become a hypocrite and you become a false prophet. Okay. So people become, when leaders lead out of fear, they're hypocrites, in that the Bible says God has not given us a spirit of fear or timidity, but of power. And when crisis comes, the last thing our people need us to do is to be hypocritical to what we preach. We need to live through that. It doesn't mean the problem will go away, but we face it with the power of God. We're not slave to fear. And also, fear makes a lot of people a false prophet. Here's what I mean. False prophets are people who just predict the future wrongly. So if you're fearful, people are fearful typically think worst case scenario. They think, oh, in Corona, it's like our business is never going to make it, or we're going to have to lay off everybody, we're going to fire everybody. And they think worst case scenarios. And a lot of people do that. A lot of people who are fearful will lay in bed at night with their eyes shut, just thinking of every worst case scenario, and they can't sleep. And you know what happens most of the time? None of it comes true.
No, that's true. Yeah.
If you live long enough, you know it doesn't come through. But if we lead out of fear, we'll become false prophets because we're predicting a future that's not going to happen. And further with that fear is a tactic that bad leaders use. Hitler used fear to control people. They used fear to control. Jim Jones in Guyana used fear to control people. The leader of the Heaven's Gate cult used fear to lead people. Many bad leaders use fear to control people, but it's not good. But faithfulness is a tactic that leaders use to inspire people. Now, it's okay. When crisis comes, you can be nervous and cautious and patient. I get it. You don't have to be Superman, but we lead out of faith, not fear. And people are looking for that. They need that and they expect that. What God has called us to.
I really love that thought. We lead out of faith and not fear. That's
right.
Awesome. Well, I want you to continue, but I want to just take a moment for a really quick commercial.
Please take a moment right now to hit share and include a comment.
I am really excited that you're here tonight, Pastor. And it's really an honor because of the fact that I get to be on staff with you. I get to watch how you lead. And I'll never forget just during the coronavirus when we came to staff meeting on a Monday morning and you said something like, we're playing ping pong, not chess. And wow, the moment you said that, I thought, what are you saying? And then you went on to explain that. Tell me what that's all about.
Yeah, well, that's my fourth point. And what I mean by that is, as leaders, when a crisis hits, you need to frame your leadership. And what I mean is you need to let the people you're leading know how you are leading them. It enables them to follow you better. So everybody knows exactly how we're operating and exactly how we're going. And leaders need to give clarity to their followers or their employees, as that's what they need. So during this time, I actually framed my leadership in two ways. One was really for our church board, and one was for our church staff, although I shared it with both. And the one is we were playing ping pong, not chess. Now, everybody knows chess, how chess works. In chess, you can take your time to make a move. And churches work that way. If we're making a decision, we can pray about an issue, we can fast, we can have meetings, we can do interviews, we can do our due diligence. We can take a month or more. We can take our time to make our move. But in ping pong, you got to make a decision like that. The ball's coming at you.
Yeah.
When Corona hit, I was having to make decisions, and you saw it daily, multiple decisions that I didn't have time to have any kind of meetings or any kind of due diligence. I had to make decisions, which goes back to my further point. You got to be ready when they come, because when crisis hits, you better be ready. And we were hitting that. So I told the board, I just reminded them that right now we're in the season of playing ping pong, not chess. So I'm going to be making a lot of decisions that I don't have time to really get your input on. But we had every couple of weeks a video interview or a video meeting where I would tell them some of the decisions we made, and they trusted everything. And just framing the leadership that way for the board and our staff helped everybody understand how it operates. And I even said, I'm not going to hit every decision perfectly, just like in ping pong. But that's the nature of the game right now. It's ping pong, not chess. And that was eye-opening for people, The second way I framed it was I talked about my remote control. And I said this, and this was really more what I said to the staff side. I wanted them to hear this. I said, on remote control, it's got all kinds of buttons. And I said, during COVID, some churches and organizations have hit the pause button. They just said, we'll just stop. And when this is all over, we'll resume. Well, they're in trouble. Many of them are right now. And if you're watching this and you're one of those people, you're probably in trouble, but there's help, obviously. We'd be glad to help you with that. Some groups hit the stop button. They just hit stop. We're done. We're out, and they cease to even exist. That happened. I know a church recently that just stopped. They're done because of COVID. Some people were hoping to hit the rewind button. They think when this is all over, we'll just rewind and start again. Well, that's not happening because the world has moved on. So you can't do those things. I said to our group, there's 2 buttons on our remote control I want us to hit. This is a metaphor, of course. Number 1 is the reset button, that we want to reset some things in our church, in our leadership, in our culture. And this season gave us the opportunity. And secondly, maybe even more profoundly, I said, I want us to hit the fast forward button because culture is changing and I want us to change with it. And Don, and this is my next point. I'll talk about this, so I don't want to get ahead of myself too much, but I said that we have gotten more work done in these past 3 months
than
we've gotten done. And we are months ahead on some things and perhaps years ahead on other things because we hit the fast forward button in so many areas. And I guess my last point, I'll talk about that, but that's how I framed my leadership, and it enabled everybody to know how I was leading them, which enabled them to know how to engage in the life of the church and what was expected of them and how to follow. And so framing your leadership is learn that from a book I forget the name of the book now, but Winston Churchill kind of did that a lot during World War II, framing his leadership so people knew what he was doing and how to follow.
Well, I can definitely confirm the fact that during the time of COVID, we did not hit the pause button.
Right.
As a matter of fact, it felt like we were putting the pedal to the metal, so to speak.
Yeah, we had that fast forward button.
Wow. It was faster than I've done in the 2 years that we've been here at Westside with you. But that's awesome. It was a great experience. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's wonderful. Well, share with us the last point that you have.
Yeah, my last point, and there's probably 100 more points we could come up with, right? But my last point tonight is when a crisis comes, leverage the opportunities. Nobody wants a crisis to come. Nobody wanted COVID to hit, of course. But when a crisis comes, it does bring opportunities. And leaders leverage and seize every single one of them. And we said we're going to hit every single one of them. I even told the church at the beginning of this, that was what I thought God was saying to me. We're going to leverage every opportunity. And we did a lot of those. I'll give you some examples. Some are small, some are big. Like one of them was, we have a big building, 115,000 square feet, massive place. And it's expensive. We pay over $100,000 a year in utilities, and we went around and turned down AC units and turned off AC units, and just leveraged the opportunity to save a few dollars right there. We did that. There was Eli Lilly in town offered a grant for churches to do better with technology with their online. We applied for that, leveraged that, and got a grant for that. There was a couple times where the hospitals close to us they were working the nurses I think 36 hours in a row. They were working so hard that we took advantage of the opportunity to feed them. We took Chick-fil-A over for everybody. We rewrote some policy and procedures that needed to be in place for our preschool. The main thing perhaps is we finished several building projects that we were working on, and we sped them up to finish. So when we come back, they're all done. So the list goes on and on. Obviously, everybody watching this in your own context, you know some ways that you can leverage, but leaders are thinking that way. Leaders are thinking, what are the opportunities before me that I can leverage faster and faster and take advantage of those things so we can go forward? And your people are counting on you to do that. They don't even really know they're counting on you to do that, but that's what leaders do. They lead. They're out front, and leveraging opportunities is one of the best way to do that. Another one just comes to mind, just for sake of sharing stories, is because I'm loving it. When we came back, we've only been back 2 weeks now with people. We're not doing communion. We're not passing the bulletin. So we leveraged the opportunity to start a brand new digital bulletin. And that we're going to stay with that. Saves us $3,500 a year. For now, anybody out there, if you're watching this, you want to see it, text the word EZ Bulletin to 484848, and you'll see it. And we leverage that opportunity. And Don, you probably could add to the list lots of things. So leverage opportunities when they come, and you propel yourself forward in your organization for sure.
Wow. Hey, Pastor, thanks so much. I mean, the things that you shared this evening, I believe in it. I saw it firsthand. And I respect your leadership so very much. And I appreciate you taking time this evening to help me with our very first video podcast. I think in wrapping it up this evening, the thing that I'm reminded of over and over in all of this is life. Doing life in many ways, there's so much about it that's temporary. I mean, we can get so comfortable and think that everything's great, and we get in this groove and we just keep going through the motions, and then all of a sudden the crisis comes, or things just they just get turned upside down. And it's how do we respond in those moments that really matter. And the things you shared tonight are very, very valuable for that kind of a situation.
Thanks for watching. Please take a moment right now to hit share and include a comment.